Hi everybody, here we are, week 3 done, on to week 4. So I'm going to make some comments about week 3. First, just a little bit of housekeeping. You may have noticed that if you make a new note now, that the all the edit functions up here are all one color. Jim was doing some footling with this and trying to make it work better, and he's made linking much clearer. So now this is linking. We were actually asking him to put back the color into the rest of it, but that's why it looks different. So he's changed linking, and so now if you go insert link, you can say a link to a website, you can pop your URL in there, or a link to a Pepper note, and then you put in the note number, okay? It's just more straightforward. It was a little ambiguous, the other one. Just that. So I just wanted to let you know about that. I also wanted you to notice that, you can't really see it here, but notes are kind of spread out across weeks still. People are, who've joined a bit later are still adding notes to earlier weeks. And I wanted to say that that's fine. And I do try to go back and read those. But I was also going to point out that this may continue, in fact, as we go on, because even though everybody will be in the class and have kind of caught up, people sometimes want to go back into more depth about a concept, and so they go back and something occurs to them that didn't occur to them before. And sometimes you can go back and then link what we're talking about now to something that happened then. But if you don't do that and you just post something there, I will try and go back and look at those. I mean, I think this is just, it's a good, learning doesn't happen in a week. Just because we decide that we're going to talk about, multiliteracies in week 3, it doesn't mean that that's the end of thinking about multiliteracies. All of these things work in this kind of ongoing, cyclical and recursive kind of way, right? It's a kind of dialectical relation between the ideas in the different weeks. So it's fine, and I just wanted to point it out because I don't want you to be either uncomfortable with that or think that I won't see that as useful, but I do actually. So I also wanted to, I thought I didn't do it for this coming week. Sorry, I did it for this coming week, but I've put in, I'm trying to make it easier for you to ask questions if you have them. So here, for instance, for this coming week on multimodalities, I've said if anybody wants to get more information about concepts mentioned in the article, add a question to this class or notes, and I'll answer questions here. But I did it like that, so it would be a little bit more anonymous than you actually writing a question, yourself and putting your name there, although you're welcome to do that. Some people may be uncomfortable with that, but I wanted to have a kind of upfront place for dealing with questions. Because you can always ask questions, and I encourage you to do that. And so this is a practical way to kind of encourage you to do that. I'm also in the process of giving back feedback to assignment 1, and I'm doing it as private replies. So you'll gradually get those as I finish that up. I'm going through the list now. Thank you to Andrew and Fiona for moderating this week. I think the exercise of thinking about about multiliteracies from these 4 theoretic perspectives, as we did in the PowerPoint, was very interesting. Actually, I think I have it here. Here we go. And it was very interesting to look at all the different ways that people kind of thought about these different concepts. And I also thought it was a really important data point, and I think Andrew got at this a bit in his comments, that the range of ways that people differentially focus on and respond to ideas. And I think it's a good data point, because if you're trying to teach as a constructivist teacher, this is one of those things, right? Everyone, regardless of what you present as material, people will take away always different things from it, because what people take away reflects their own experience. And their own they're the things that they consider more important and so forth. So, and you can't assume that everybody responds in the same way, even if it's to the same material. And I think that this complexity of issues of the teaching process also comes up in the summary of the discussions that Fiona did, and that thinking about how teaching using multiliteracies involves thinking about teaching in more extended ways, using portfolios, using authentic contexts, looking at change over time. But these are new pedagogies, right? And they're also kind of emergent. And like critical pedagogies, this stuff is not really fully out there yet. And if you if you think about this from a teacher's point of view, there isn't really a kind of clear set of guidelines. And I think really we are developing these now. I mean, and it's your practices, those of you who teach in language contexts and literacy contexts, it's you who are going to be really working these kinds of things out over the next years, because even when you apply critical theory to pedagogical practices, the how-to of that is much more differentiated, much more subtle than sort of curricular guidelines have been in the past, I think, and teacher practices. And if you look, and again, there's more contradictions if you look at, well, more differences, I suppose. So multiliteracies theory, and then if you look at that against traditional online learning research, which has been very psychological in its background and orientation, that they have very different ways of talking about what's valued and what learning is and what knowledge is. And so there's a lot of different kind of worldviews kind of colliding in here. And so we have to sort of learn to kind of pick our way carefully through this, because theoretically it's still a kind of interesting minefield, really. So I wanted to just mention that there's really three important issues that are going to go on appearing during the course. One is the challenge of teaching within these emerging paradigms. Teachers are essentially in the position of being innovators and creators of curriculum in their particular contexts, as opposed to consumers of existing curriculum. And I think that has been, that's becoming more and more evident, because technologies and because of the impact and changes that these different media, and not just the media though, but the whole kind of cultural relationship that's being opened up by things like the internet. So second is this ongoing issue in the role of technology. So there's a gap in understanding about how technologies are most meaningfully employed, and with a student body who, as you were talking about this week, are technologically literate but not necessarily learning literate. And then how do we help those students use these technologies for other than social purposes? How do we help them use these productively for educational purposes? And I think that's both a generational and an experiential gap. And as teachers, we have to try to build across this, but it's not an easy task. And obviously, what the task is varies hugely in the subject matter you're trying to do this with, as well as the age of the students and other issues. And then there's the third issue, which is this tension between kind of the promise of globalization as the way it's sort of manifest in the internet, and the consequent linguistic dominance and power base of English, and how that's going to play out over time. How is it going to impact other languages? How do we try to both connect to others, but also preserve people's linguistic and cultural identities? And I think we have to, again, we're not quite there yet. I think that perhaps people who in English-speaking countries need to learn more languages, and I, who am one of the people who don't know enough languages and regret that, and I'm now trying to learn many languages as I, at this stage of my life. But I think that that hasn't been an embedded practice in a lot of English-speaking countries. Because I remember episodes of Star Trek long time ago, and they used to have, I think it was called a universal translator. So wherever you went, whatever planet you landed on, you always had this thing, psht, and then sometimes so you always understood what anybody said to you, and occasionally it would misfire and not work, and then you were having really big problems. While I think that's a great idea, and it would be fun. It would solve immediate problems. I also, I don't think they really dealt with the issue of the cultural weight that language carries. The idiomatic and all of the more complex linguistic carriers of culture. But in the absence of that handy device, I think this is a real challenge for us, for society broadly in many countries. I mean, globally. So I think that's a kind of ongoing tension as we go on talking about all of these issues. So this week, we're going to start talking about multimodalities, and I'm just going to say a word about that. Thanks first to Laura and Daniel for moderating our explorations this week. And then just a quick mention that multimodalities is one of those concepts that not everybody likes in the area of new literacies and multiliteracies. The contentious part is that by focusing on the mode, we end up privileging it, and that's that technological determinism argument that I'd mentioned before. And we assume that it's the technology is the determining kind of focus that we need to think about. But there are some new literacy scholars, very influential ones like Donald Lu, for example, who argue that literacy is the overarching concept, not the modality. So literacy is the overarching concept. And then we should investigate particular instances of different literacy practices within that, in different contexts. Some of those contexts are going to be technological, some will be other. So an example of a literacy practice in an online course would be note titles, and we'd had a bit of a discussion about that before, about not putting just reply, but trying to have a more meaningful title. Well, the role of note titles in online discussions and online interactions is actually quite important. And so that is an example of a new literacy practice. We don't have to think of it as being in a different modality. It's a particular practice in a particular context. So, so Donald Lu's argument is that we should be focusing on these and not calling things by other names. But so I just want you to know that we have to keep an eye on that kind of theoretic framing, because I just want you to be clear about this, because all this theory around these issues about language learning, about technology and multiliteracies and multimodalities. All of this theory is in constant kind of flux and change, so we need to be aware of that. Theory never sits still, right? It changes all the time. It's a living thing. So even though the actual examples of this for this week in these articles are pretty grounded in school experiences, so this won't be a big issue, I think, in our discussions, but I want you to just be clear about this as a theoretical framing. Good to keep in mind. So there we are. I think that's good. And if you have any questions, as I've said before, please let me know, and I'm happy to answer them. I hope everybody's doing okay, and I'm enjoying your discussion so far. So we'll talk to you soon online. Okay, take care. Have a good week.